morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice Radio. So today, we need to take a look at the worst tag teams we've ever seen. It did become a little bit of a running joke with the Tag Team Pokémon that every time they released a bunch in Japan, they all went and started winning tournaments. And as a whole, they have been a very, very nice group of cards. But I've sat down, I've made a list, and I think we can pick out the 10 worst of them. Now, an honourable mention here to Blastoise and Piplup that was never going to make the list because I love Piplup too much. To be fair, there is one on this list of Pokemon I love, but still, I like Blastoise and Piplup. They're cool Pokemon. Blastoise and Piplup's an odd one because it looked like it had so much potential. For free energy, you do 150, and you can attach free water energy from your hand, and you then get to heal 50 damage from Pokemon for each energy you attached. It seemed so good. Energy acceleration and healing and all sorts. The reality is, this isn't a bad card. I don't look at this and go, boo, it sucks. And to be honest, when Frostmoth came out, giving us more energy acceleration, I got well excited. But it just never really saw any success. Not quite bad enough to make the list, which makes me happy, but shall we say, it came quite close. So in at number 10, we've got MARSHADOW and MACHAMP. And honestly, the thing that always hurt MARSHADOW and MACHAMP, the thing that stopped it being really good, was the fact that it was a fighting Pokemon in an age where we didn't have very good fighting energy acceleration. Again, on the face of it, this is a decent card. 2 energy, 30 damage, but if one of your Pokemon was knocked out by damage last turn, it did 120, and that was actually enough to get a one-hit KO on Pikachu and Zekrom. And we did see this, obviously that's not making the list, and we did see this see a bit of play. This did jump in around here and there. There were a few little rogue decks that did have this in there, but it was really just for the first attack. The free energy 160 was way too expensive, and the free energy 200, but if you had 4 energy on there, then during your next turn, if it would be knocked out, you go down to 10 HP instead. Sound amazing. Well, the second one at least a GX attack, and it is, it's great. But we never had anywhere near good enough energy acceleration for fighting Pokemon to make this even remotely viable. Yes, it did get into a few rogue decks because of the first attack, and that was awesome, but I don't feel bad putting it at number 10 on the list. In at number 9, we've got Reshiram and Zekrom. And firstly, this makes me sad. Secondly, this is kind of embarrassing for me, if I'm honest with you. Because when this first came out in Japan, I made a video about how this was going to be the best deck in the format. And incidentally, I meant it. And I was coming from a place of honesty, and I'd gone through all the data and I'd looked at all the results, and it really, genuinely looked like it was going to be one of the very, if not the best deck in the format. So what happened? The answer is we always had better alternatives. I'm not putting this at number 9 because it's a garbage card that looks terrible. I'm putting it at number 9 because it's been legal for a long time now, and I don't think I've ever seen it topping a big tournament. Although again, this one, I feel bad putting this on the list. I think these last two are the two you could really argue I got it wrong, but my question would be, what would you put on the list instead? Now, for 2 energy, you discarded up to 3 in any combination of basic fire and basic lightning energy from your bench Pokemon, doing 90 for each one discarded in this way. And there were so many options here for getting the energy. We had Naganadel that accelerated energy to itself. And then, of course, once you're using Naganadel, you might as well use Beastring to accelerate energy from your deck to Naganadel. We had Tapu Koko Prism Star for lightning energy. We had Welder for fire energy. And it really did seem like it was going to be awesome. And maybe it was the fact that it did cap out at 270, and when VMAXs came along, that wasn't quite enough. Or maybe it was just we had better options. Certainly in later years, the weakness wasn't so bad. And then the GX attack, 2 fire, 2 lightning energy, 170 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. But if you played End Resolve this turn, you do 170 to 2 bench Pokemon. And if your opponent's played a couple of Dedenne, that's 4 prizes. This is a Pokemon that's confused me a little bit because it seems so good on the face of it. But the fact of the matter is, I'm putting it on this list because it's had plenty of time to prove it's as good as I thought it was, and it hasn't done it. Plus, there are so many really good tag teams, alright? There really are so many that really have done so well that we do have to clutch for the ones that haven't seen success. In at number 8, we've got Naganadel and Guzzlord, and this is a start of the point in the video where I just don't feel bad anymore. Naganadel and Guzzlord, it's another one of those that looks good on paper, but it's just been outshined by so many other things in the format. It's got an ability that lets you discard a Pokemon from your hand to heal 60, which is decent, but there's too many things out there that have been one-hit KOing. Free energy 180, and it is an awkward energy cost, but then again, it is an Ultra Beast, so you got stuff like Beastring. And then for 1 energy, you turn all your prize cards face up, but for the same cost as your main attack, a Colorless, a Darkness, and a Psychic, you take 2 prize cards while putting them all face up. The fact of the matter is, for this one, 180 for free energy just didn't end up being good enough, and outside of Beastring, we didn't necessarily have the energy acceleration, and Beastring can be played around, and it's another one of those that looked good on paper, but never followed it up. In at number 7, we've got Magikarp and Wailord, and to be fair, I love Wailord, so there are some Pokemon that I like personally that are making their way onto this list in a way that I'm not terribly happy about. You see, Magikarp and Wailord has 300 HP, which at the time was a record. We've never seen 300 HP Pokemon before. I mean, especially for basic Pokemon, that's ridiculous. But the days of using Wailord EX in a stall deck were over. Plus, it was weak to Pikachu and Zekrom, which would get a one-hit KO of its regular attack, which was not terribly ideal, shall we say. So that was a little bit upsetting. And then it was just too expensive. 5 energy, 180. Too expensive. 1 energy, 10 damage, no. But 8 energy, 100 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Sounds good, and you will get a whole bunch of support Pokemon. But you're talking 8 energy, and you're also talking it's not actually going to KO bigger Pokemon. So against some decks, it's not actually even going to be that disruptive, which is slightly upsetting. It was never good enough with Naganadel and Quagsire, although it did get teched into some Naganadel Quagsire decks, and it did even sometimes get used, but it was not the main part of that deck. And it was never good enough when Frosmoth came out, and it just unfortunately suffered from being too gosh darned expensive. And you think that would make me less excited about Wailord V? But you'd be wrong. In at number 6, we've got Muck and Alolan Muck. And this is another one where a lot of people tried to make this work. This was not a card that I never saw played. It was a card that I never really saw doing well. There were plenty of people out there trying to make Muck and Alolan Muck work. I just never really saw anyone be successful. Now, it did have Malamar for a large part of its legality. So, at least we had Malamar to accelerate energy, which was cool. But the fact of the matter is, it just never did enough. Free energy, poison, put 8 damage counters between turns. Sounds horrible, but if your opponent just gets out the active, you're doing free energy 80 on a 2-prize Pokemon, which wasn't ideal. 4 energy, 120, and if the defending Pokemon is poisoned, you heal 100. I played against this online with a Hooper deck, and I literally could not do any damage because they just healed more damage than I was doing. That was annoying, but there were so many decks out there that did more than that amount of damage, and it just ended up being overwhelmed by those decks. I did like having a free GX attack, 0 energy, paralysis, and poison. If there's 4 extra energy on there, 15 damage counters between turns. And then you're talking paralysis and anything being KO'd after your opponent's next turn, which was cool, but it was basically too expensive and there were better options. And when, you can be playing Mewtwo and Mew as a psychic tag team, people just were not interested in Muck and Alolan Muck. Very few of these cards I'm talking about on this list were out and out bad. What we're talking about is the cards that never really saw any success because they weren't quite good enough or they were overshadowed by other cards. In at number 5, we've got Eevee and Snorlax. Now this is really sad, because Eevee and Snorlax looked like a pair with Pikachu and Zekrom. They were pretty much the first ones revealed. Pikachu and Zekrom was really the first one. And then you got the whole Pikachu and Eevee thing, and in recent years they've been very much a pair running around. And yet Pikachu and Zekrom has been phenomenal, and Eevee and Snorlax just hasn't been, which is very sad. And certainly having that fighting weakness hasn't helped, but then again there's plenty of other Pokemon like Pikachu and Zekrom which have been able to weather it quite nicely. And really this just comes down to not having good enough attacks. So we've got one energy, attaching energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon, but then you're sitting in the active using an attack and leaving yourself in harm's way. Not ideal. 4 energy, 120, but 240 to an evolution, which was nice, but against basic decks, and let's be clear, we have been in a very basic heavy format lately, it's nowhere near as good. And then the GX attack, 4 energy, 210, or 5 energy, 210, and draw till you got 10 cards in your hand. It's good, it's a very nice attack, but it's your once per game GX attack, it's 5 energy, 210 isn't enough to KO tag teams, etc, etc. And when you compare that to Pikachu and Zekrom doing 200 to the active, 170 to the bench, or Arceus and Alga and Palkia letting you take an extra prize every time you take a KO for the remainder of the game, even though it's good, it ends up just not being good enough. In at number 4, we've got Slowpoke and Psyduck. Now, to be fair, this did get a little bit of love and play in Japan for a little while, and there were people that really did try making it work. And it's an extremely fun tag team, and to be fair, we've got combos that actually work, but again, this has never really seen any play or success in bigger tournaments. For 2 energy, you do 40 damage for each supporter card discarded from your hand. And to be fair, we do have obvious combos with this. I mean, the obvious combo here is using Misty's Favor. That searches for any free supporter cards from your hand. So there's 3 supporters ready to go. And then, of course, we've got Lapras. And Lapras sits on the bench, and every turn lets you grab a Misty's Favor from your discard pile and put it into your hand. So in theory, 4 of them gets you 4 Misty's Favor every turn. It sounds awesome, and in a lot of ways it is. But in some other ways, unfortunately, it just isn't. It ended up being too awkward. The 2 energy could end up slowing you down here. And it didn't have high HP for a tag team. And there were and I played this deck a bunch. There were just too many turns where you were 1 or 2 supporters away from getting a KO, and then you would get KO'd yourself. Now the GX attack, no. 10 damage, flip a coin, if heads, 100 more damage. If it's got at least 8 energy total, flip 10 coins and it does 100 more damage for each heads. Now, clearly, if you've got 8 energy on there, you are going to be KOing anything unless you're super unlucky. But the fact that I said if you've got 8 energy on there should have been your clue. Even when Frostmoth came out to accelerate water energy better, it never ended up being good enough. In at number 3, and this makes me really sad, Togepi and Cleffa and Igglybuff. Now, I adore this card, and it's the kind of card where I don't think anyone out there hates this card. Not unless you played against it and it went very, very wrong. It's a lovely card. The artwork is amazing. It features these beautiful baby Pokemon. It's just a wonderful, wonderful card. And when you read it, it's hard not to be giddy like a small child. Now, the free energy, 120 flip until you get tails, 30 more for each heads. That is always going to lead to sadness. Because the fact of the matter is, it ain't going to be that often that you actually get to flip all heads. You're probably going to get like 1 heads. And then you do 150, which isn't good enough. But Supreme Puff GX, I mean, partly the name, but also take another turn after this one, but you skip the between turn steps so poison, etc. doesn't kick in. If you've got 16 fairy energy on there, your opponent shuffles all of their bench Pokemon and all cards attached to them into their deck. Now, if you could get this working, this was a game-winning attack. Because what you essentially do is you use this, your opponent shuffles all their bench Pokemon into their deck so they've only got their active left. But then it goes to your turn again, and hopefully you've used something like what would now be Boss's Orders, to drag your opponent's Pokemon into the active. So you've got a weak Pokemon in the active, something with 120 HP or less, and then you KO it and you win the game right there and then. It's so much fun! And I did see some builds of this list with the Battle Chatelaine ladies actually trying to make this work. Because Morgan could accelerate up to 12 energy. You looked at the top 12 cards of your deck and attach any number of energy to your Pokemon in any way you like. But even if you hit 12 out of 12 with Morgan and attach for the turn, you are still 3 energy away. I saw some really fun inventive lists of this, and I know some people did get it working here and there, but this was far too awkward, and as much as I love the card, and I do, no. Speaking of cards, I'm sad to put number 1, Latias and Latios. Now, I do point out when I'm right quite a lot, but I also like to try and point out when I'm wrong. So all I'm going to tell you is that there is a video on this channel made around about the time that Team Up came out where I ranked all of the Tag Team Pokemon from Team Up, and I didn't put Latias and Latios last. And blatantly I should have. Now, on the one hand, oh my goodness, look at this artwork. On the other hand, this is not a good card. And look, you all know by now that Latias is Baby Daisy's spirit Pokemon, and I do believe that I was bamboozled by that. You see, for a Water, 2 Psychic, and a Colorless, it does 240 and discards 3 energy from that Pokemon. But it's expensive, it's awkward, and it doesn't one-hit KO tag teams. To be fair, it fits into a Malamar deck, you just have to play Water Energy. Then, the GX attack, 1 Psychic Energy, attach 5 Basic from your discard to your Pokemon in any way you like. But if you've got 2 Energy on there, you also gained immunity the following turn, assuming your opponent didn't gust around it, which they probably would. But the fact of the matter is, and lovely Joe from Omnipoke did point this out, and I didn't want to believe it at the time, but I kind of need to accept it now. This wasn't as good as Ultra Necrozma, who's a 2-prize Pokemon that we had anyway at the time. You see, if you had 3 Psychic and a Metal on Ultra Necrozma, you did 260 damage, which is more, and you could pile more energy on to do more, and you had a GX attack that could do 60 to each of your opponent's bench, or put 6 damage counters on, which could completely wreck their bench and win games, and this is the kind of time where I have to turn around and go, yeah, I love Latias, and it is Baby Daisy's spirit Pokemon, but actually, if I try and look at this vaguely objectively, this was just a worse version of Ultra Necrozma, but I'm not putting it number 1, and you can't make me. Because the worst tag team Pokemon we ever had was Solgaleo and LUnala. This is a card that I just plain don't like. 4 energy, 230, but it can't use the attack next turn. Okay, I suppose. It's kind of like Reshiram and Charizard, except Reshiram and Charizard have Welder, and you don't have Welder, which is a pretty big deal. Plus, you don't have the Outrage attack that Reshiram and Charizard have. And then the GX attack, 200 damage, but if you play Lily's Full Force from your hand during this turn, you prevent all effective attacks, including damage done to each of your Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. So at least that stops your opponent gusting around it, because all of your Pokemon are protected, which is lovely, it buys you a turn, but the attacks just aren't particularly good. And again, we just fall back to, if you're playing a Psychic Tag Team Pokemon, why aren't you playing Mewtwo and Mew? And that's largely the conclusion for Solgaleo and LUnala. It's worse than Mewtwo and Mew. It looks like Reshiram and Charizard, except it doesn't have the awesome Outrage attack, and it doesn't even have the art by Mitsuhiro Arita that all the other tag teams, other than Reshiram and Zekrom, which was from the same set, actually did. So, sorry ladies and gentlemen, I think this is the worst tag team Pokemon we ever had. So there's my list of the 10 worst tag team Pokemon, but I'd be kind of excited to see your list. So let me know in the comment section, would you? Go nuts! Be nice! And do remember that if you move one down, you got to move some up, and if you move some up, you got to move some down. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.